The door of my workshop flew open. There he stood, a man in a fake HOA police uniform, demanding my computer with files that would expose their $400,000 fraud scheme. When he shoved me against my workbench, he didn't see my son enter behind him. One Marine with Jiu-Jitsu training versus a corrupt official trying to silence a whole community. Who do you think won? I never thought I'd find myself in a physical confrontation at 58 years old. Especially not in my own workshop. That sacred space where I've spent countless weekends crafting furniture. The hobby that kept me sane after losing my wife, Eleanor, 5 years ago. For 15 years, our neighborhood, Cedar Ridge Estates, was everything we'd hoped for when we moved in. A quiet community of hardworking folks, many of us approaching retirement age. The HOA fees were reasonable, the neighborhood well-maintained, and the board meetings boring in the best possible way. That all changed when Raymond Sterling was elected HOA president last spring. A former corporate executive with custom Italian suits and a brand new Mercedes. Hardly the modest lifestyle you'd expect from a supposed retired businessman. I should have trusted my instincts right away. As a senior financial auditor who spent 30 years following money trails and exposing corporate fraud, alarm bells were ringing from his first meeting. But I kept quiet, a decision I'd soon regret. My son, Nathan, had just come home that week. 22 years old, a Marine on medical leave, recovering from a training injury, and a competitive jiu-jitsu fighter since high school. Eleanor always said he got my analytical mind, but none of my physical caution. Thank God for that. One habit Eleanor insisted on throughout our marriage was documenting everything. Paper trails save people, Richard, she'd say. That lesson was about to prove more valuable than I could have ever imagined. The trouble began in earnest when we received notice of an HOA fee increase. Not the usual 2 to 3% annual adjustment, but a staggering 100% increase, effective immediately. The notice cited critical infrastructure improvements and enhanced security measures that nobody had seen or approved. When I called the HOA office to question this, I was directed to Walter Hayes, Sterling's newly appointed community compliance officer. Hayes, a stocky man with a perpetual scowl, had apparently worked corporate security with Sterling in the past. These increases are non-negotiable, Hayes informed me with obvious satisfaction. The board vote was unanimous. At the next monthly meeting, the room was packed with angry homeowners. Patricia Miller, a 72-year-old widow living on Social Security, stood up with shaking hands. "I've lived here for 20 years, she said, her voice breaking. With this increase and the new emergency fund assessment, I'll have to choose between medication and keeping my home." Sterling leaned back in his chair, adjusting his gold cufflinks. "If you can't afford to live here, perhaps you should move. Property values are our priority." The room exploded in outrage. I raised my hand and was reluctantly acknowledged. As a financial auditor, I said calmly, standing to address the room, "I've reviewed the budget documents provided. The numbers don't add up." I pointed out specific discrepancies. $45,000 allocated for landscaping improvements that weren't happening, $80,000 for security systems that didn't exist. Sterling's face flushed red. Hayes stepped forward menacingly before Sterling pulled him back, forcing a smile. "Mr. Bennett clearly misunderstands complex financial management. This discussion is closed." But as people filed out, 6 neighbors approached me. "Something's not right," said Thomas Walker, a retired police officer. "And we need your help figuring it out." Our informal investigation committee met in my workshop the following Saturday. Among us was Samantha Jenkins, who worked at the county records office. "You won't believe what I found," she said, spreading documents across my workbench. Sterling was involved with 2 other HOAs before moving here. Both communities experienced massive fee increases followed by waves of foreclosures when residents couldn't pay. Thomas pointed to a spreadsheet I'd created. "The shell companies receiving our HOA funds? I ran some checks. They have no employees, no offices, just post office boxes. Using my accounting software, I traced payment trails through 3 layers of shell companies, all eventually leading to offshore accounts with complex ownership structures. Classic money laundering techniques I'd seen in corporate fraud cases. Based on these numbers, I said, we're looking at approximately $400,000 diverted from our HOA funds in just 8 months. That's criminal, gasped Evelyn Reed, a retired teacher. But the most disturbing discovery came when Samantha cross-referenced property records. Look at this, she said quietly. 3 homes that went into foreclosure last month after the owners couldn't pay the increased fees. They were purchased by Oakville Holdings. Guess who owns Oakville? We all said in unison. Sterling, I explained. He's draining the community, forcing foreclosures, then buying the properties at discount. It's essentially a hostile takeover of the neighborhood. My son, Nathan, who had been quietly listening from the corner, spoke up. Dad, this isn't just fraud. These people are dangerous. You need to be careful. I nodded, organizing the documents on my computer. We need irrefutable evidence before we go public. Everything backed up, everything verified. Nathan surveyed the workshop windows with military precision. Let me help secure this place. I don't trust these guys. The next morning, I found a note slipped under our front door. Mind your own business or lose your home. No signature, but the message was clear. Nathan noticed our security cameras had been tampered with overnight. Professional job, he muttered, examining the cut wires. These weren't random vandals. That afternoon, Sterling announced new community security protocols via email, including mandatory property inspections for safety compliance. The target was obvious. Our neighbor, Francis Baker, who worked maintenance at the HOA office building, risked his job to record a board meeting we weren't supposed to know about. We need to handle the accountant problem before he causes real damage, Sterling said on the recording. Hayes, make sure those files disappear. I don't care how. Nathan installed hidden cameras throughout our property, particularly in my workshop. 2 days later, they captured Hayes walking the perimeter, testing windows, examining the door locks. They're planning something, Nathan said, reviewing the footage. We need to move faster. We called an emergency meeting with our trusted neighbors. I laid out the evidence. Based on all financial records, Sterling and his associates have diverted over $400,000 from our HOA funds using a complex network of fake companies and fraudulent contracts. We need to present this at the community-wide meeting next week, Thomas urged. That's the plan, I agreed. I'm compiling everything into an airtight presentation. Once the community sees the evidence, they'll vote them out. I worked late into the night in my workshop, organizing financial records, creating clear visualizations that even non-financial people could understand. Nathan insisted on staying nearby, often practicing his Jiu-Jitsu forms in the yard just outside. Just like when you were a teenager, I joked. Except now I have a reason to use it, he replied, his expression serious. 3 days before the community meeting, Nathan's doorbell camera captured Sterling and Hayes having a heated discussion outside our house. Get those files today, or we're both going to prison, Sterling hissed. I don't care what you have to do. Minutes later, Samantha called in a panic. Hayes just left the HOA office with some official-looking papers. He was telling the secretary he's conducting an emergency inspection at your address for unauthorized business activity. My hands shook as I quickly backed up all our evidence to an encrypted cloud storage. Another one of Eleanor's insistences. Always have a backup no one can touch, she'd said. Nathan stood in the workshop doorway. Dad, let me handle this. No, I said firmly. This is my fight, but stay close. I hurriedly organized the physical evidence, heart pounding as I heard tires on gravel outside. Nathan disappeared around the corner, but I knew he wouldn't go far. I reached into my desk drawer and activated the voice recorder Eleanor had given me years ago. Never meet with anyone you don't trust without recording it, she'd said. My pragmatic, protective wife had prepared me for this moment without even knowing it. The workshop felt suddenly quiet, that peculiar stillness before a storm breaks. Through the window, I could see Hayes striding purposefully toward my workshop, a folder tucked under his arm. His face set in grim determination. I took a deep breath and reminded myself of what was at stake. Not just my home, but the homes of dozens of retirees and families who couldn't fight back against this corruption. Someone had to stand up. Today, that someone was me. The workshop door crashed open with such force that tools rattled on the walls. Hayes stood in the doorway, dressed in a black polo shirt with HOA police emblazoned across the chest. A made-up authority with a made-up uniform. Richard Bennett, he announced with artificial officiality. I am conducting an emergency inspection under HOA Bylaw Enforcement Code 15C. He held up a document that looked official but was likely as fake as his uniform. I stood my ground beside my computer. You're trespassing, Mr. Hayes. Please leave my property immediately. Your unauthorized business activities violate HOA regulations, he continued, stepping further into my workshop. You need a court order to enter my property or seize anything, I said, surprised by the steadiness in my voice. That document isn't a legal warrant. His eyes narrowed. We know about your cloud backup, Bennett. Hand over your passwords and account information now. That confirmed they'd been monitoring our communication somehow. I felt a chill run down my spine. Get out of my workshop, I repeated. Hayes's facade of officiality dropped. Listen, old man. We know what you're doing, and it stops now. He advanced toward me, his bulk intimidating in the confined space. You're going to give me access to all your files, or things will get very unpleasant. I'm asking you once more to leave, I said with surprising speed. He lunged forward, shoving me hard against my workbench. Pain shot through my lower back as I collided with the solid oak edge. My family photo display crashed to the floor, glass shattering around a picture of Eleanor. You think you're so smart, Hayes snarled, looming over me. But you're just a meddling old fool who's about to lose everything. He reached for my computer, and I tried to block him despite the pain. He shoved me again, harder this time. Hey! A sharp voice cut through the workshop. Hayes spun around to find Nathan standing in the doorway. His posture relaxed, but his eyes intense with focus. Get out of my father's workshop, Nathan said, his voice deadly calm. This is HOA business, Hayes blustered, pointing to his ridiculous shirt. Interfere and you'll face serious consequences. Nathan stepped inside, his movement fluid. I see an intruder who just assaulted my father on our private property. Hayes's face darkened as he advanced toward Nathan. You don't want to do this, kid. What happened next occurred so quickly that it seemed choreographed. As Hayes reached out to push Nathan, my son sidestepped with practiced ease, simultaneously securing Hayes's extended arm. In one continuous motion, Nathan pivoted, using Hayes's momentum against him. Before Hayes could react, he was on the floor, face down, with Nathan controlling him in a perfect arm lock. Hayes struggled and then howled as Nathan applied just enough pressure to ensure compliance without causing injury. That's what we call positional control, Nathan explained calmly, as though teaching a class. I'm not hurting you, but I'm not letting you hurt anyone else either. Hayes thrashed ineffectively. You're assaulting an HOA official. I'll have you arrested. Nathan increased pressure slightly, causing Hayes to gasp. Breaking and entering, impersonating an authority figure, assault, attempted theft, conspiracy to commit fraud. Those are just the felonies I witnessed in the last 2 minutes. You have bigger problems than me restraining you until the Reynolds police arrive. Police. Hayes's voice cracked. Our neighbor called them the moment you laid hands on my father, Nathan explained. They should be here in about 3 minutes. I suggest you use that time to think about how cooperative you want to be. Hayes's demeanor changed instantly. Listen, this isn't what it looks like. Sterling put me up to this. I can give you everything on him. Nathan maintained his hold. Save it for the officers. Hayes's desperation grew. You don't understand. Sterling has done this before. He targets communities, drains them dry, forces foreclosures, then buys up properties. I have proof. I'll testify. The sound of police sirens grew louder, and Hayes' struggles became more frantic. I was just following orders. Sterling said no one would get hurt. 2 police cruisers pulled up outside. Officer Martinez, whom I recognized from community meetings, entered first, hand near his holster. Situation contained, officer, Nathan said calmly. This man broke in, assaulted my father, and attempted to steal property. I'm a Marine Corps sergeant performing a citizen's arrest using minimal necessary force. Martinez nodded, recognizing Nathan from the police department's community outreach program at the local Marine base. I can take it from here, Sergeant Bennett. As the officers secured Hayes, he launched into his defense. I was invited here. They attacked me when I was performing official HOA duties. That's not what the video shows, Martinez replied, nodding toward our security camera. Or the audio, I added, holding up Eleanor's voice recorder. The officers discovered Hayes' fake HOA documents and unauthorized badge. While they were still processing the scene, a black Mercedes screeched to a halt outside. Sterling burst in, immediately distancing himself. Hayes acted completely on his own, he declared. The HOA had no knowledge of his actions. Martinez looked unimpressed. Mr. Sterling, we've received some very interesting financial documents from Mr. Bennett's cloud storage. Detective Walker from Financial Crimes is on his way to speak with both of you. Sterling's face drained of color. Within the hour, Detective Walker, no relation to our neighbor Thomas, arrived and reviewed the evidence. Mr. Bennett, he said, we've been building a case on similar HOA fraud schemes across the county. Your documentation just connected several dots we've been missing. The emergency community meeting the following evening had to be moved to the community center gymnasium to accommodate the crowd. Detective Walker gave a preliminary presentation of their findings. Based on our investigation, we've uncovered a sophisticated fraud operation targeting not just Cedar Ridge Estates, but 3 other HOA communities in the county, he explained. The total misappropriated funds currently exceed $1.2 million across all communities. A collective gasp swept through the audience. Former board treasurer Janice Collins approached the microphone, visibly shaken. I resigned 3 months ago because Sterling threatened to expose personal information about my daughter if I didn't approve his expenditures. I'm ashamed I didn't speak up sooner. One by one, residents came forward with stories. Elderly homeowners who nearly lost everything to manufactured violations, selective enforcement against anyone who asked questions, intimidation tactics against those who couldn't easily fight back. The most damning revelation came from the county prosecutor who attended the meeting. Our investigation reveals that Mr. Sterling's ultimate goal was to force enough foreclosures to acquire majority ownership in the community, at which point he could legally dissolve the HOA, eliminate deed restrictions, and sell to a commercial developer. We found preliminary negotiations with a hotel chain interested in this location. Sterling, who had been released on bail with travel restrictions, tried to slip out of the meeting but was confronted by angry residents. When he attempted to push past Thomas Walker, officers immediately placed him under arrest for violating bail conditions. The community voted unanimously to create an emergency oversight committee and appointed me interim treasurer to help stabilize the finances. The forensic accountant's preliminary assessment was sobering, nearly $500,000 missing from our accounts, though they believed a substantial portion could be recovered through asset seizure. As the meeting concluded, Detective Walker pulled me aside. Mr. Bennett, your meticulous financial documentation made this case possible. We've been trying to catch these guys for over a year. 1 month after the arrests, our community had begun the healing process. Nathan used his military connections to organize a volunteer team that helped repair properties that had fallen into disrepair when owners couldn't afford both maintenance and the fraudulent HOA fees. The forensic audit was completed, and through asset seizure and recovery efforts, we managed to reclaim about 70% of the stolen funds. The state attorney general launched a broader investigation into similar schemes statewide, using our case as a template. While organizing Eleanor's old files to make room for the community financial records I now maintained, I discovered her journal from 10 years ago. To my shock, she had noted suspicions about similar HOA issues in our previous neighborhood, including descriptions of someone matching Sterling's description at community meetings. "Always follow the money," she had written. "Someone is buying foreclosed homes too quickly. This feels coordinated." My pragmatic Eleanor had seen the pattern a decade before any of us. I wished she could have witnessed justice finally being served. Our new HOA structure included unprecedented transparency, all financial records accessible online, quarterly professional audits, and a requirement that major expenditures receive 75% community approval. Local media coverage of our story prompted HOAs across the state to review their financial controls. 3 other communities discovered similar fraudulent activities and reached out to us for guidance. My workshop, once just my personal sanctuary, became a weekly meeting place for our community financial literacy program, helping residents understand HOA finances and spot warning signs of fraud. The greatest satisfaction came when Sterling and Hayes, facing overwhelming evidence, accepted plea deals that included full restitution, substantial fines, and prison sentences. 6 months later, I found myself testifying before the state legislature about HOA reform, advocating for laws requiring greater transparency and oversight. HOAs serve an important purpose when run honestly, I told the committee. But without proper safeguards, they can become vehicles for the worst kind of predatory financial abuse, targeting those least able to fight back, our elderly and working families struggling to maintain their piece of the American dream. Nathan decided to pursue a civilian career teaching self-defense to seniors after his military service. Inspired by what had happened in our community, "Dad, when I took down Hayes in your workshop, I realized there's more than one way to serve and protect," he told me. Our community established an emergency fund specifically to help vulnerable residents with unexpected financial hardships. Named the Eleanor Bennett Memorial Fund, in honor of the woman whose insistence on documentation helped save our neighborhood. The most profound change wasn't financial or legal, but in community spirit. Where once we had been isolated neighbors, we became an interconnected community that looked out for one another. Weekly potlucks, volunteer maintenance teams, and renewed trust transformed Cedar Ridge Estates. My son and I stood in my workshop, carefully restoring the broken picture frame that had held Eleanor's photo. As we worked together, I reflected on what had happened. My father always told me there are 2 things worth fighting for, no matter the cost: your family and your principles. That day in my workshop, I was defending both. Remember, a bully with a fake badge is still just a bully. And in America, we don't back down when someone tries to steal what we've worked our whole lives to build.